When astronomers first logged 3I Atlas in July 2025, the world hardly took notice. After all, it was merely another interstellar wanderer, another fragment of cosmic debris drifting through the immense void between stars. The third such object ever observed, certainly, but still, by every indication, nothing beyond a quiet visitor traversing the solar system on a one-way journey. But then the James Webb Space Telescope, perhaps the most potent gaze humanity has ever directed at the cosmos, fixed upon it. And what it observed altered everything. This wasn't simply an icy rock heated by the sun. Deep inside 3I Atlas, something was radiating. Not haphazardly, not erratically, but rhythmically, like a pulse, like a heartbeat. And as days passed, what began as an odd curiosity started transforming into something much more unsettling. Brightness levels escalated far beyond forecasts. The object started releasing thermal energy from inside, not from its sun-exposed surface. Then arrived the signals, radio pulses recurring with human-like accuracy. And ultimately, the trajectory shift. The object deviated deliberately. This wasn't a rock following a passive route. This was an object acting with purpose and possibly with consciousness. Something resides within 3I Atlas. And the James Webb Telescope might have just verified that it's alive. At first, it was merely a statistical aberration, a luminous spot amid many in the Webb Telescope's infrared stream. But as the team examined the data from the NIR SPEC instrument, one irregularity refused dismissal. 3I Atlas didn't act like any other space object. Typical interstellar arrivals fade and brighten unpredictably as they rotate, expel matter, or unevenly reflect sunlight from frozen surfaces. But 3I Atlas displayed no such fluctuations. Instead, its luminosity stayed unervingly steady. Even more concerning, the object produced a centralized, concentrated glow from its center, like a tiny oven pulsing at precise intervals. Every 4 hours, the heat rose and diminished in a flawlessly timed sequence like a biological cadence. The pattern was too exact for geological origins. It didn't align with rotation, solar wind, or any recognized natural mechanism. It originated from deep within, entirely untouched by the varying sunlight angle or the object's solar distance. Scientists termed it a thermal irregularity. But privately, some started murmuring another term: heartbeat. The pulse was deliberate, slow, and mechanical, echoing not like stellar emissions, but like an engine respiring in deep space. Something within this object was creating internal power separate from outside influences. And for those analyzing the patterns, one frightening query began to surface. What sort of object energizes itself in the void? As the thermal evidence grew impossible to overlook, radio astronomers entered the probe. Telescopes worldwide from South Africa to California directed their antennas at 3I Atlas. For days, the signals were clear. Then came the revelation. The Allen Telescope Array picked up a faint narrowband emission, a steady pulse appearing every 4 hours, flawlessly aligned with the thermal spike seen by Webb. At first, doubt prevailed. Could it be interference, an echo, local noise? But as hours became nights and nights turned to weeks, the signal held firm. It was consistent, precise, and remarkably enduring. The pulse wasn't merely there. It was responsive, displaying slight adjustments, synced with solar wind changes. Several sites verified the identical pattern, eliminating equipment faults or artificial origins. And the recurrence. It was too mathematically pristine. Fourier analysis uncovered a stable carrier wave dissimilar to anything naturally found in space. It was as if something aboard 3I Atlas was not only operational, but attempting to transmit. Teams tried linking the signal to familiar pulsars, neutron stars, and cosmic ambient radiation. But each check came back negative. No natural accounts remained. The final trial involved transmitting a basic response back. A sequence of prime numbers, periodic table elements, and fundamental mathematical constants. 72 hours later, a response came, faint, warped, but present, and it arrived precisely on time. Something had detected us, and something had replied. It was August 18th, when everything shifted once more. Webb's ongoing stream recorded an abrupt outburst from 3I Atlas. An explosive energy burst that boosted the object's luminosity by more than 40% in under an hour. No comet acts that way, not even during eruptions of vapor or dust jets. But even more astonishing was what ensued. A reassessment of the object's path revealed a slight yet irrefutable course adjustment. 3I Atlas wasn't simply adrift anymore. It was navigating. The alteration positioned it nearer to the solar system's ecliptic plane, aligning it more accurately with the inner worlds. The European Space Agency's orbital simulators, headed by Marco Micheli, rerun calculations, trying to ascribe the maneuver to outgassing or other material processes. But the figures didn't align. The force needed for such a change exceeded any natural expulsion. And more revealingly, the outburst and path shift happened concurrently, as if one initiated the other. No documented comet, asteroid, or interstellar body has ever modified its own course. Not this way, not with intent. If something on 3I Atlas was reacting to us, our emissions, our tools, our existence, then this was no longer mere surveillance. This was a meeting, and whatever was guiding this object had just executed its initial action. In the wake of the outburst and path alteration, focus shifted to the object's makeup. Spectroscopic examination sped up across all key observatories. The group at Johns Hopkins, guided by Carrie Lease, started breaking down every wavelength Webb could provide. What they uncovered intensified the enigma tenfold. While typical comet components like water ice, CO2, and carbon existed, they were superimposed by absorption bands never documented in nature. Some pointed to metallic alloys, including rare earth elements employed in sophisticated earth manufacturing. Others suggested quantum substances hypothesized in labs, but never witnessed beyond theoretical physics articles. These weren't arbitrary cosmic mixtures. They were crafted, organized at a molecular scale to perform in manners natural substances cannot. Specific infrared reflections echoed the optical signatures of metamaterials engineered to curve light, the type used in stealth systems. In essence, 3I Atlas wasn't merely active. It wasn't just replying. It was fabricated with accuracy surpassing anything humanity has created. And if the substances are artificial and the emissions deliberate, then it's no longer about what 3I Atlas is. The query now is who constructed it and why has it arrived? While spectrometric study persisted, researchers at Caltech's Deep Space facility started testing passive signal charting, basically monitoring 3I Atlas across various wavelengths at once to identify any structural echoes. What they found rattled the scientific world to its foundation. The object wasn't only sending radio pulses. Its whole bulk was functioning like a resonant cavity. Every few hours, a low-frequency vibration echoed across the X-band and microwave range, rebounding to Earth with a timing too uniform for chance. More disturbing is that when the emission was inverted, decelerated, and overlaid on a spectrogram of human voice, it generated patterns strikingly akin to language. Not any familiar tongue, but organized, comprehensible, as if something within 3I Atlas was imitating dialogue, or worse, absorbing and adapting. Some experts think the object isn't merely responding to emissions. It's evolving, syncing itself to the rhythmic structure of human broadcasts, perhaps gearing up to communicate in a form we can grasp at last. But others dread a darker option. What we're detecting might not be the object itself, but something internal, rousing, awakening, readying to appear. A fresh series of infrared scans from the James Webb Space Telescope disclosed something even more perplexing. Deep in the thermal map of 3I Atlas, scientists noted a shifting inner framework. Not haphazard, not liquid, but spiral-formed, turning with unnatural regularity. The spiral was compact, even and orderly, as if built. Its motion was not responsive like expected from moving rubble in a rolling mass. It was independent, revolving on a stable axis even while the object tumbled freely in space. This central core appeared immune to inertia, implying some type of inertial suppression or inner gravity management. Technologies we've only envisioned in conceptual physics. Even more disconcerting was the insight that the spiral's proportions adhered to a flawless golden ratio, not singly, but recursively across 3 scales. In nature, this design appears in living beings, DNA, helices, galaxies, nautilus shells, but never in frigid rocks from distant space. It's a schema of organic intellect, a fractal imprint, something we link with creation, not disorder. And if a golden spiral is whirling at this thing's core, then it's not merely alive, it might be conscious. Less than a week following the spiral finding, an abrupt drop in the object's luminosity was noted. At first considered rotational shading, but high-contrast imaging from Webb uncovered something unparalleled. A portion of 3I Atlas's exterior had relocated, not fractured, not splintered, displaced. A panel, rectangular, sleek, and mirrored, had withdrawn, exposing a shadowy hollow inside. No natural comet or asteroid has ever shown mechanical action. The withdrawal was precise, balanced, and lasting. Within the freshly revealed hollow, infrared surveys found no rubble, no vapor, no heat disarray. Instead, there was constancy. A compartment designed to stay chilled and obscured, like a vault or a nest. Scientists split opinions. Was this a vent, a detector grid, an access? Whatever it was, it had opened facing Earth. And as the object proceeded on its route, that aperture stayed fixed on our world like an eye. Not inactive, not surveying, aiming. And within that hollow, a secondary rhythm started to surface. Distinct in pitch, slower, but more potent. A second heartbeat. Something additional had stirred inside. As if all this weren't sufficient, NASA's Ames Research Center made one ultimate discovery that redefined everything. Employing sophisticated data linkage between JWST's data and Earthbound spectral archives, they pinpointed trace elements in the object's emission profile that aligned with terrestrial biopolymers. Not precisely DNA, but structures so comparable in form and role that they functioned like synthetic equivalents of living tissue. Lab-cultured hybrid substances meant to replicate life. These polymers weren't inert. They reacted to solar rays by changing form at a molecular scale, indicating programmability like vital circuits. We've only started testing this on Earth in biotech facilities, but 3I Atlas is constructed with it. The boundaries between biology and mechanics dissolve entirely within this object. It's not alive as we comprehend life, nor a device as we classify technology. It is both, or maybe something surpassing both. A container, a germ, an entity, a dispatch inscribed in shape. And if that dispatch is activating now, the query shifts from what is inside to what occurs when it emerges. By now, it was evident that 3I Atlas was no chance voyager. But then arrived the most alarming disclosure yet. Drawing on archival gravitational lensing records paired with recent movement study, a cadre of independent physicists spotted a faint but indisputable pattern. The object's present path wasn't singular. Indeed, an almost matching route had been documented previously, not by human devices, but by ancient geological features on Mars, on Europa, even on Earth. Vast constructs like the Giza pyramids, Nazca lines, and Martian crests long deemed accidental or innate displayed mathematical orientations directing to the exact vector 3I Atlas now pursues. This was no fluke. It was as if the object had traversed before, and its coming had been etched into rock by societies long extinct or perhaps long influenced. Scientists started discussing gravitational recall, the notion that space-time itself retains movement. But if this object had visited earlier, then it's not merely stopping by, it's coming back. And the true query turns to what transpired the previous time. In a frantic bid to grasp the object's essence, scientists attempted a desperate measure. They employed the Vast Chime Array in Canada to send a wideband silence burst toward 3I Atlas, a technique crafted not to communicate, but to detect vacuum feedback. It's an approach theorized to reveal man-made voids like chambers behind barriers in archaeological sites, only cosmically scaled. When the emission hit the object, the outcome was startling. For 6.3 seconds, 3I Atlas soaked up all observable frequencies without yielding a hint. Not bounce, not bend, just absolute quiet. Then on the 7th second, it released a lone return burst, but one that precisely replicated a 1977 oddity called the wow signal. Once regarded as the top contender for alien outreach, the ramifications were crushing. Either the object had seized that emission across eras and replayed it intentionally, or it was the initial transmitter. Abruptly, what we viewed as a chilly drifter became a potential starting point of contact, a specter reenacting its own dispatch. But if 3I Atlas was the sender, who was the planned recipient? With apprehension growing among those nearest the data, an informal working group assembled. A mix of astrophysicists, linguists, exobiologists, and philosophers. Their conclusions, though unreleased, seeped into the scientific shadows. The designs woven in the object's pulses weren't haphazard. They adhered to a symbolic framework termed recursive universal grammar, a system of significance that exceeds language, math, and biology. Essentially, it was a blueprint for intellect itself. More worrisome, this blueprint exhibited traces of emergent self-illusion. In basic terms, it wasn't just conveying, it was discussing itself. Researchers posit 3I Atlas may harbor a non-human awareness not housed in data vaults or wiring, but ingrained in geometry, light, and vibration. The object is not just alive. It may be cognizant of us, not merely because we watched it, but because it had already incorporated us into its blueprint, as if its passage through our solar system was eternally destined to spark acknowledgement, not from us, but from inside itself, as if it had returned home. Then came the final turn. Observatories globally started noting something even more unforeseen. Slight alterations in star locations. Not drastic, not instantly apparent, but genuine. The constant stars that steer everything from GPS units to ancient sailors had moved by fractions of arcseconds. Too minor to disrupt everyday existence, but sufficient to activate warnings in every astrophysical framework. When pinpointed, the distortions all met in a manner that twisted time markers near 3I Atlas. A team from the University of Tokyo executed forecast models and arrived at a chilling verdict. The object was not simply warping light or gravity. It was gently curving space-time around itself. Not enough to create a wormhole or black hole, but enough to indicate a confined alteration of reality's fabric. The only recognized entities able to do that are black holes. But 3I Atlas doesn't consume. It directs. It remolds the heavens not as a byproduct, but as a communique inscribed across the stars. Something is arising, and it's revising not only our cosmic knowledge, but how the cosmos has eternally perceived us. In a frantic bid to grasp the object's essence, scientists attempted a desperate measure. They employed the vast chime array in Canada to send a wideband silence burst toward 3I Atlas, a technique crafted not to communicate, but to detect vacuum feedback. It's an approach theorized to reveal man-made voids like chambers behind barriers in archaeological sites, only cosmically scaled. When the emission hit the object, the outcome was startling. For 6.3 seconds, 3I Atlas soaked up all observable frequencies without yielding a hint. Not bounce, not bend, just absolute quiet. Then on the 7th second, it released a lone return burst, but one that precisely replicated a 1977 oddity called the wow signal. Once regarded as the top contender for alien outreach, the ramifications were crushing. Either the object had seized that emission across eras and replayed it intentionally, or it was the initial transmitter. Abruptly, what we viewed as a chilly drifter became a potential starting point of contact, a specter reenacting its own dispatch. But if 3I Atlas was the sender, who was the planned recipient? With apprehension growing among those nearest the data, an informal working group assembled. a mix of astrophysicists, linguists, exobiologists, and philosophers. Their conclusions, though unreleased, seeped into the scientific shadows. The designs woven in the object's pulses weren't haphazard. They adhered to a symbolic framework termed recursive universal grammar, a system of significance that exceeds language, math, and biology. Essentially, it was a blueprint for intellect itself. More worrisome, this blueprint exhibited traces of emergent self-illusion. In basic terms, it wasn't just conveying. It was discussing itself. Researchers posit 3I Atlas may harbor a non-human awareness not housed in data vaults or wiring, but ingrained in geometry, light, and vibration. The object is not just alive. It may be cognizant of us, not merely because we watched it, but because it had already incorporated us into its blueprint, as if its passage through our solar system was eternally destined to spark acknowledgement, not from us, but from inside itself, as if it had returned home. Then came the final turn. Observatories globally started noting something even more unforeseen. Slight alterations in star locations. Not drastic, not instantly apparent, but genuine. The constant stars that steer everything from GPS units to ancient sailors had moved by fractions of arcseconds. Too minor to disrupt everyday existence, but sufficient to activate warnings in every astrophysical framework. When pinpointed, the distortions all met in a manner that twisted time markers near 3I Atlas. A team from the University of Tokyo executed forecast models and arrived at a chilling verdict. The object was not simply warping light or gravity. It was gently curving space-time around itself. Not enough to create a wormhole or black hole, but enough to indicate a confined alteration of reality's fabric. The only recognized entities able to do that are black holes. But 3I Atlas doesn't consume. It directs. It remolds the heavens not as a byproduct, but as a communique inscribed across the stars. Something is arising, and it's revising not only our cosmic knowledge, but how the cosmos has eternally perceived us. As information from 3I Atlas kept flowing, a team at CERN tried a bold tactic. They inputted the object's signal bursts into a harmonic resonance framework usually applied to forecast quantum decoherence in particle impacts. What surfaced astonished all. The object's outputs formed ideal harmonic constructs when charted across multidimensional phase space. Something that only arises in finely calibrated physical setups like musical tools or atomic chronometers. But then amid a session on September 2nd, the signal disintegrated into disordered static only to reorganize moments later into a wholly new harmonic form. This wasn't a flaw. It was a shift, as if the object had sensed the scrutiny and countered by changing its inner framework to evade pattern detection. This degree of awareness isn't merely responsive. It's versatile, like a vital intelligence safeguarding its essential mysteries. Researchers began calling this instant avail because it was the initial sign that 3I Atlas wasn't just under observation. It was choosing what we could perceive. As the object's speed and path were honed, something profoundly disturbing surfaced. Per orbital dynamics and established astrophysical limits, 3I Atlas would have needed to stem from an interstellar zone almost 100 light-years distant. Yet, given its present velocity and route, it would have required over 500,000 years to reach here, unless it sped up some time. But there was no sign of slowing upon solar system entry. No traceable fuel origin, no ion plume matching propulsion, nothing. The calculations were unfeasible unless time had been modified. A modest team at MIT suggested an extreme hypothesis. 3I Atlas might have employed time dilation to cross space quicker than light, not by violating relativity, but by skirting it. That would render it not just a guess from another stellar system, but a chronological voyager, something that traversed time as readily as distance. And if it has accomplished this previously, then it may have witnessed societies ascend and decline, including ours. One of the most surprising revelations came not from a researcher, but from an artist, Lucia Finn, a a data artisan who renders astronomical information via 3D modeling algorithms. When she graphed the structural geometry of the object's inner resonance from prior harmonic data, she observed something that halted her cold. A repeating geometrical design resembling a face, not human, but elongated, balanced, and profoundly otherworldly. Initially, her depiction was rejected as pareidolia, our inclination to perceive patterns where none are. But deeper scrutiny affirmed that the resonance data did encode the design purposefully, reiterated at multiple levels. The object was emitting a form, an emblematic identifier, a face, an intellect, an existence. Whether it was a maker, a navigator, or a depiction of the awareness inside, no one could determine. But now the communique was no longer numerical or technical. It was pictorial, effective. It was seeking recognition, and the face was gazing back. In a concluding effort to comprehend the object, the James Webb Group concentrated all accessible tools on one zone near the spiral center. What they discovered wasn't a thermal origin or emission source, but an area that violated all established reflection principles. Light went in but didn't exit, not absorption, confinement. It was as if the zone operated as a light snare, or worse, an information repository. When they charted the encircling gravitational field, they uncovered something even more jarring. The object's mass density implied an interior vastly bigger than its outer dimensions, like a TARDIS phenomenon, where inner space outstrips external limits. If this held, 3I Atlas could hold in repository not a substance, but of recollection, a chronicle, a gallery, or perhaps a seed repository of societies encoded in light and time, awaiting activation. But the repository was secured, barred by a geometry no human algorithm had breached. And perhaps it was never intended to unlock unless we served as the key. For ages, humanity has peered into the night heavens, questing for insights about our beginnings, our cosmic role, and if we are genuinely solitary. We transmitted emissions. We constructed telescopes. We envisioned guests. But never did we conceive that something might already be observing, awaiting us to merely examine closely enough. 3I Atlas didn't simply wander into our solar system. It came with intent, with cadence, with remembrance. It throbbed like a heart. It responded like a mind. It adjusted its path to encounter us, as if it knew precisely who we are. And now, as it glides quietly beyond Mars, still radiating from within, still releasing emissions we scarcely fathom, the query is no longer what it is. The query is what it seeks, and if we were ever meant to reveal it all. Is it a scout, a courier, an artifact? Or is it something wholly different? Something alive, not in our defined sense of life, but in a manner that redefines us. Because perhaps 3I Atlas wasn't destined to arrive at Earth. Maybe Earth was eternally destined to arrive at it. And now that we've observed it, acknowledged it, and contacted it with our devices, one terrifying reality resounds louder than any space emission. We've already been spotted. And once spotted, you can't revert to solitude. If this chilled your spine, you're not alone. What if humanity's grandest discovery didn't stem from an emission we dispatched, but from a mute object already en route to us? Subscribe for further unfolding revelations as this narrative develops. Share in the comments. Do you think 3I Atlas is alive? Or is it something graver, something constructed and forsaken? I'd love to hear what you think about this, so drop a comment below. If you enjoyed our conversation today, please share this video and subscribe to help the channel grow. Every bit of support counts.